Hey everybody, it's Joe Trippi, and welcome back to That Trippi Show with Alex Sashlow. This week, momentum is everything. We'll get into why Kamala Harris's momentum is real and why Trump's got momentum too in the wrong direction. Some really bad errors that have me scratching my head, if you're not scratching yours, even for Trump. Alex, where should we get started?
Well, typical for our show, we record as major breaking news is happening, but this is some big news. It is now breaking, and we're recording as President Biden is addressing the nation on this. But a massive prisoner exchange deal was just announced with Russia, bringing some very notable Americans that were held in captivity home. Joe, want your reaction to that?
This is a huge, just a very big win for the Biden-Harris administration. To get Whalen, Karamursa, Gerskovich, names. These are all names that we've been talking about for years to try to get them released. And, it's clear now that the reason this release happened, because it was a multilateral thing. It was multiple countries. I think 7 or 8 countries participated in this. And it just shows that it was the ability of Joe Biden and the Harris administration to work with our allies. This is why it's important to be building alliances and not turning your backs on them, like Trump. It just shows that contrast. German Chancellor Scholz did this as a favor to Biden. He said that. No one believes he would have done this for Donald Trump. He did it because he was asked to do it for Joe Biden. And several other countries, to pull this off, the bank shot, because what Russia wanted, the key person that they wanted released, was in German custody. And Germany had refused repeatedly to do it for years. And so that was the key, and the key was the pressure that the Biden-Harris administration, not pressure so much as leaning into the alliance and reaching agreement with allies to make this all happen. A far big, really major contrast with how none of this could have happened and wouldn't have happened if Donald Trump were president. And actually, in a weird way, Putin realized this. Putin realized that the only way to get the people he wanted out, the only way out, U.S. allies would go along with it, would get him what he wanted in this exchange, would be because the Biden administration could get it done, that they could work those contacts and get it done. And he knew that none of them would do this for Trump. None of them. Trump might do anything for Putin. Trump might do anything for Putin. But not
the other countries.
But not the other countries. And so this is just, again, shows that it really does matter how this all works. I just think this is a huge win. And the other thing, for me, it's personal. Karamursa, I consider a friend. I was, myself and Stuart Stevens, another senior advisor to the Lincoln Project, conversed with him and several other people in Russia at his urging along the way, just about democracy, about the way to get citizens engaged. And about 18 months after we had a little online Zoom summit, about 18 months later, he was arrested by Putin because he had spoken out against the invasion of Ukraine. And so ever since then, Stuart, myself, and others, along with all those people trying to get Whalen and Gerskovich out, we're constantly trying to do whatever we could in the hopes of seeing him released. And today, to see him on this list of those that were released is just really just actually for me pretty emotional. I'm just really happy to see it, and thank the Biden-Harris administration for the diplomacy to pull it off.
There's some really interesting details, and we'll learn more about this throughout the day. One thing that's going around, kind of the TikTok of how this happened, literally an hour before he announced everybody he was dropping out of the race, he called the Prime Minister of Slovenia, who I think there were 2 Russian spies that were part of the swap to secure that pardon and get them involved. He was like, I think it's something that we don't necessarily see. The world was kind of consumed with whether or not he was going to stay in the presidential race, and he and Kamala Harris were just working keep doing their jobs behind the scenes. Harris actually was, in another detailed account, she was very heavily involved in this too. She pulled the German chancellor aside, I think in February at the last bilateral meetings they had, and talked about Krasikov, who's the main guy that Putin wanted in the deal to get him released. And she, working directly with the German chancellor, is what got a lot of that done. So very clear. I mean, again, good to see that her getting to do credit for it, but very clear that the diplomacy would, like you said, Joe, would not have happened anywhere near a Trump administration.
But not only that, they kept it quiet. I mean, they did it quietly behind the scenes while the rest, as you put it, Alex, while the rest of the world and the country were all, is he going to stay in? Is he going to get out? I mean, hours before he's moving, she's doing this. In the Trump administration, they would have been bragging about anything, about what they were doing for Putin or whatever out loud. It's just, and they weren't trying to score any points. They just wanted to get these people out, and they did what needed to be done. And again, like for me, it's wonderful news for everybody. For me, there's a little bit of personal emotion tied into this because of my, I really do consider Karamursa a friend, and it was just really painful to know that he was, along with everybody else, but it was personally a burden that like weighed on me, and I was kept trying to figure out ways to help, and to see this happen just is a huge relief.
Well, on that positive note, let's move back home. A lot going on. Like you said at the top, momentum continuing to gather. This is a big foreign policy feather in Kamala Harris's cap, but her campaign has been also surging this week. Joe, what are you seeing in columns to the good for Kamala Harris?
Look, again, the most amazing thing about all of this is that there was absolutely no bump that Donald Trump got either after his convention. There was no post-convention bump that almost always happens. In fact, I can't even think of when it hasn't happened. And then, I mean, even people who go on to lose big, like Mike Dukakis, have a massive bump coming out of their convention. Didn't happen. And then the assassination attempt, no bump at all. Everything basically he keeps, stays where he was. And then you have Biden get out. Harris locks down the nomination by getting over half the delegates and tons of endorsements. And you see pretty clear bump happening right now. And we haven't even gotten to the convention yet, but a bunch of polls have Harris surging into the lead. Overall, her favorability is moving in the positive direction. And that's not the case for Trump. And it certainly wasn't for Joe Biden. Trump's unfavorable rating's gone down. His pick, is grown, his unfavorable rating. His pick, J.D. Vance, I think is the first vice presidential pick that I can remember that starts out with a very severely high net negative favorability rating. That's clear, and that's growing as well.
And we'll get to that, I promise.
Thanks. But the new poll in Pennsylvania has Harris up 47-43. And that's the Susquehanna poll, and that they've nailed it in 2020. So she's up 4 points there in their polling. National polls, the Economist YouGov poll, it's 46-44 for Harris. That was a +3. Trump was ahead by 3 there, so that's a good swing of like 5 points. Civics has it 49-45 Harris. That's +4. You just keep seeing this, and it's not just those polls. I mean, there's others, but what's more significant, is that, like you're going to see some Republican polls come out that aren't high rated, but even they, I think, are showing some of this. Momentum is only moving one way right now. So, but, to get really into it here, Alex, what matters is, the swing states. Obviously, Morning Consult has Harris up by 1 in all swing states. In Arizona, she's up 49-47, tied in Georgia. In Michigan, she's up 53-42. Nevada up by 2, 47-45. North Carolina, Trump's up by 2. And in Pennsylvania, they have Trump up by 4. And then you have Wisconsin where, again, Harris is up by 2, 49-47. So, like, yeah, is there room to move further? But we haven't gotten through
those are all margin of error.
And we haven't gotten through our convention yet, and we don't have a VP pick yet. So all these things. And by the way, there's going to be 3, maybe 4 crazy, big, news-breaking, earth-shattering events between now and November for sure. One of them may be happening today that shows again why foreign policy and alliances matter, and why Trump trying to destroy NATO and tear it down is a huge mistake, and supporting Putin is against Ukraine is not smart. And so, like, there's all these kinds of things that are piling up, I think, building the forward momentum of Harris. And again, we're seeing, as we said, just real erosion in Trump's favorable, his unfavorable is growing. It's now in the 30s. And I mean, his favorable is now in the 30s. There's a big difference here. Something. And I think you've heard a lot of commentary about this being one of the things that has happened, if you think about it, was that Donald Trump dominated the popular cultural conversation since the moment he came down that escalator in a way that was sort of pop cultural conversation in older person speak. In other words, he was competing with Joe Biden on connecting and demanding attention. And it worked for him because in that older cultural world, communication world, he could just dominate it, period. He was the star celebrity guy, the apprentice guy. And he could, do the "you're fired" stuff and things like that. What's happened is he's been eclipsed. Kamala Harris is commanding right now the popular cultural conversation, and in a way that has totally connected with people under 45, with the younger generations, and does not do any harm to her with competing with Trump in that other conversation. In other words, a lot of us may not really understand what brat means, but she speaks to that, and everybody who gets what brat means connects with her immediately, and the rest of us are like, that's cool, whatever it is, that's good with me. And so the same thing on a number of the things that when she said, if you have something to say, everybody that she connects with immediately knew that the next line was, before she said it, everybody knew the next line was that, say it to my face. And what I'm saying is, if you're 65 or 68 and you didn't realize, oh, that's where she's going with this.
Or 33. To be fair.
But my point is you go, yeah, that's a good line. But what I'm saying, so many people connected before she said it. She's in tune generationally in a way that bridges. I mean, I know we talked about, Biden always talked about he was a bridge to the future. He's done that by passing the torch. But she really bridges those two divides in a way that is dominating the popular culture right now. And I think that's what's going to make this move even more as we grow, as we get closer.
Well, and you think about everything else that's happening in the world right now. She really did a good job with the Netanyahu meetings this past week. She was instrumental there. Didn't let him bully Americans, as he often does. And by the way, and our friend Simon Rosenberg pointed this out, economy.
Don't forget that.
Is still moving. Yeah. Inflation was 0 in May, declined in June, and has run at the Fed target for the last 6 months. And we're going to have interest rate cuts soon. And the markets are reflecting that. Dow's well over 40, S&P's up. I mean,
and rates are going to get cut in September against Trump's wishes again. So Trump, again, remember, folks, when he didn't want a border bill, a security border bill done that everybody agreed was really strong and actually leaned heavily towards the conservative side of things, with Lankford and getting behind it and sponsoring it, and Trump said, no, don't do that, because that's gonna hurt my chances and help Biden's. So now he doesn't want a rate cut. Look, a rate cut that would help you get a lower mortgage rate, a rate cut that would lower your cost of buying a car, all these things. Like, no, we don't do a rate cut now. The Fed is, he doesn't want that, right? He doesn't want that because that might actually get you to think, hey, maybe these guys know what they're talking about and they're right about the economy. That's bad for him. So he wants to delay the rate cut till after the election in November. Who cares if you've got to go through 3, 4, 5 more months, 6 more months of paying higher interest rates on your credit cards or all those other things? No, that would just be wrong. Don't do that. I want to win. And you're going to help Biden out or Harris out. I mean, whatever. It is insane. And it's getting more obvious every day. And we talked a long time ago about the lagging economy numbers. And that too is going to get better over the next 4 months, a lot better, particularly after rate cuts come in. So there's a lot of things moving again in the right direction.
Joe, you said it at the top. Obviously, a lot of good momentum for Kamala Harris. On the other side, this has to be the worst week Trump has had in a long time. Got to be years, right? It's really striking how many face plants they've had, but it is wild to me how bad of a week to 10 days they've had.
Yeah, and I think part of that too, though, is this kind of cultural conversation dominate. The way Kamala's been dominating that makes it his attempts to re-engage that older cultural conversation. It diminishes it. It makes it smaller. So he's starting to try to still go geez, what was that playbook that I ran in 2016 that got me there? And he's starting to try to get back to that playbook, and it just seems so old and so weak compared to the momentum that she has. And so you can have campaign momentum, but there is such a thing as negative momentum, and Trump is stuck, and he's just digging in deeper and deeper. He did have multiple events this week. I mean, that are just really kind of Christians, get out and vote. Just this one time, you won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, it'll be fixed. You'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I mean,
what a lie.
Yeah, and for a guy, trying to distance himself from Project 2025, he hasn't been able to do that very well.
Right. Basically, coming out and saying it's wild. And I would actually argue, and I know people were saying, oh, maybe he shouldn't do this event, or the NABJ shouldn't even interview him. I mean, the one thing that, and I know you'll get to this too, that was covered. That was a big moment that actually kind of broke through him just totally face planting at the Black Journalists event, which I don't think would have happened 2 weeks ago.
No, well, he may not have been there and saying those things 2 weeks ago, because he's now like I said, it's all grasping for the old messaging that got him the win in 2016. And the problem with that is, hey, it's not 2016 anymore. It's 2024, and you're not running against Hillary Clinton. You're running against Kamala Harris. And of course, his instincts against one against a woman, and 2 against a Black woman, Black Asian woman, whatever, he can't figure it out. And he knows. I mean, that's the whole thing. He went totally off the rails, got pulled out of there after 35 minutes of an hour interview, fought with the interviewers the entire time, went full. That
was probably actually my favorite part. Yeah,
went full birther, questioning if Kamala Harris was Black. And he kept, again, doubled down, followed up, posting afterwards, the crazy Kamala's saying she's Indian, not Black. This is a big deal. Stone cold phony. She uses everybody, including her racial identity. I mean, it's just, okay. This is so old. And Kamala called him out on that. I mean, she said, it's the same old story, was her comeback. But that's the thing with Trump. When he hits rock bottom, he tends to grab a shovel and keep digging. Rick Wilson said it's the worst week for Trump since Access Hollywood. So I don't know what you think about all this, Alex, but this is the kind of thing that would drive me nuts as a campaign manager. So what are Chris and Susie Wiles thinking right now? I mean, they can't not. Well, or did they send him in there to do exactly this? I mean, was this a calculated thing?
There's no way. I hear you on that, but the one thing that's always been consistent about Donald Trump, I mean, actually, there's quite a few, but this one in particular, he has never been able to sustain a message.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
He just can't seem to get out of his own way. So, okay, let's say for a minute this was all 4-dimensional chess, probably 5 at this point. I don't even know how many dimensions at this point it is, but he's doing all the weird stuff because it is weird, and we'll get to the weird thing in a minute, to distract from Project 2025 or how bad JD Vance is or whatever, which I could almost buy, but there's no way he's going to be able to do it for another 96 days. There's no way that it's going to be coherent.
Well,
I just don't buy it.
But this is this whole points to the thing we've said we've been talking about for months and months and months, that we were in a dead heat, and this guy was trying to keep a coalition of white supremacists, white Christian nationalists, and 18 to 20 points of black voters that weren't voting for Joe Biden, right? It was, remember, the 70-18 divide there. So think about this. How does he goes to this, he goes to NAG, and how does this help him keep that coalition together? It doesn't. It blows it apart. He may in his head have thought, oh, this is great. I can really energize the white supremacists and the white Christian nationalists and just really drive that energy and drive them out. But he can't. That was the whole problem with his coalition. This is why I always thought Biden would beat him in the end, because in the end, he wouldn't be able to, quote, stay on a message, as you point out, that would hold that coalition together. And the main reason, even with his craziness, you wouldn't be able to do it is because there's no way you could hold that coalition together all the way through November and keep it energized without blowing up pieces of it and moving even more moderate Republican women away and other things, given 2025 and his great pick for VP. Anyway, so no, I think this goes to it. And I think you pointed this out to me too, that that after Joe Biden stepped down, the one thing that's happened is that the media is actually covering Trump crazy again. So and I think you've been right about that. But Bill Kristol tweeted, Republicans were given the choice between defeat and dishonor. They chose dishonor, and they will be defeated. There is, I think that you see, my sense is that as the enthusiasm for Harris continues to grow, you're going to see sort of deflated energy on the Trump side of these things. I mean, with MAGA supporters, I know we think they're just, there's nothing that can de-energize them. They're going. I actually wonder whether this could get much bigger than we think, because I think that momentum thing, this shift, they've got to be feeling it, and they thrive on seeing him as a winner. And the more he starts looking like he's the loser he is, I think that support may weaken in terms of the excitement and energy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Well, you know who else is excited? And I know this is a visual medium, but you can probably see over my left shoulder, as soon as you started talking about Chris and Susie, Panda jumped up behind me and is just sitting over my shoulder watching you.
That's his
She's
cat.
fired up too.
That's his cat.
We got black cats for Kamala Harris too. I'm not quite a childless cat lady, but I'm kind of close. I mean, Katie is. But speaking of which, I do want to point out the Harris campaign broke Zoom this past week like 4 times. First, they did a Black Women for Kamala thing that raised like $4 million. Then they did, actually, I was just talking to someone in the hallway in my building who was so excited then they were doing a White Girls for Kamala thing. And then Doug's old campaign manager, Wade, texted me. He's doing the White Dudes for Harris rally too. And that raised another $3 million. Yeah. So the enthusiasm's there. I do also just want to point out, and we're now, I think, as we're recording this, either 95 or 96 days. You'll forgive me if I don't know the exact one. The one thing that at this point you can kind of start really seeing is, where are campaigns spending their money? Where are they buying TV? Obviously, the Biden campaign had been buying heavily in Wisconsin the last couple months, but Trump just placed a buy in North Carolina, which, look, there's going to be a lot of media. There's going to be billions spent in this election. But the fact that buy right now is going into North Carolina and not like Minnesota is a telltale sign about where this thing is going.
Yeah, no, North Carolina is in play. It may be further in play depending on who she picks as her VP. Not sure she'll pick the governor of North Carolina, Cooper, but if she does, that definitely puts it in play. But it's in play because the MAGA crazies have nominated some real whack jobs there that are like literally double digit or near double digits behind the Democrats that are running for governor and statewide superintendent of public instruction. We've talked about that in the past. But look, if you're Democrats, you'd much rather see Trump up in North Carolina than, like you said, Alex, than in Minnesota. The key is, I think, the Democrats and the pro-democracy folks who were depressed and basically wallowing in the fact that we might face defeat have been unleashed by Joe Biden. He didn't just pass the torch to Kamala and all these people that might be her VP or the younger generation of Democrats that are now emerging, that are in leadership in the Senate and the House and governors, and governors throughout the country, that we're learning a lot more about as they get sort of talked about for VP, but unleashed a huge amount of energy at the grassroots and in the neighborhoods and locally. And I think and at the same time, that's weighing down the euphoria that was out there. I mean, remember before this, the Republicans were, you had Chris LaCivita and Susie Wiles like talking about like 370 electoral vote win, just like literally euphoria, mania out there. And I think that's totally gone away. Not only gone away, but I think base is starting to get depressed as they realize, particularly, I think, because I hope we're going to get there. They didn't vet J.D. Vance, and that's a problem.
Yeah, you were on CNN talking about this. I mean, they clearly didn't, right? I'm just curious. We got to move on, but I'm really curious. For our listeners, go over that.
They clearly did not vet this guy, right? Either they didn't vet him or they knew that he said all this crazy stuff in his past and they didn't care. And that means they didn't care that this guy's a weirdness machine. I mean, he is an absolute weirdness machine, which might be the title of this show today. But anyway, Vance, just weird stuff keeps emerging. This week, it was unearthed that he said Trump won because of racism. And he said he didn't think the Mexican border wall would work. I mean, like Trump picked a guy. Trump says, no, racism had nothing to do with me winning. And we got J.D. Vance saying, oh, yes, it did. He won because of racism. It's like, great. It's like, just shows how crazy this stuff can be. And then, like I said, this is another one where you have Trump is great with, build that wall, like quick, easy, cultural. They become sort of cultural phenomenon in our language that are grasped by people and easy to understand. But the border wall didn't work. His VP pick said that it wouldn't, and it didn't. And it just shows, again, after what the Biden-Harris administration actually has done and would have been able to do even more of had that border security bill, bipartisan bill passed. Again, the difference between doing the work and just talking slogans and old bullshit. And I just think that is what's going to happen here as we get further down the road.
Well, Joe, we got to wrap, but just coming back to the contrast, coming back to what we started with at the top of the show, everyone does need to go watch the president's remarks. CNN, I think, is just about to wrap up as we're talking about it. But at one point, they asked the president why President Trump said he could have done this without giving away anything and brought the hostages home for free. And Joe Biden said, well, why didn't he do it when he was president? That was a good line. He sang happy birthday to the daughter of one of the freed hostages. He had jokes. But overall, I think this was the Joe Biden that a lot of Americans voted for. And I think this was the vision of America that a lot of Americans are going to have to go vote for again in November.
That's a great place to end this, Alex. It's a great place to end this episode on that note. Thanks, everybody, for listening to That Trippi Show. This podcast will always be free with support from our advertisers and is part of Resolute Square. Check out the latest at resolutesquare.com/Trippi. Please subscribe to That Trippi Show and leave a review on Apple or wherever you listen. Also, if you're listening to this episode on YouTube, please like and subscribe to get alerts when we post the next episode. We'll see you next week.
Resolute Square.